Hey guys, here's a quick video on how to use my Baileywiki castle template in case you want to make your own, use some of my designs and alter them, or if you want to enter the contest and make them in the right shape. So a couple of things. First of all, there are a number of levels here. Don't pay attention to the naming conventions. I just kind of built this as I went. So you're just basically looking at the factory floor that I used, and you just get to jump straight into that. There's not an easy way to clean this up afterwards in Dungeon Draft, so you're just going to have to go with what I've already got. Second thing to be aware of is the asset packs in use. So let's see if I can get this where you can read it. There's a couple of asset packs that I've created, one called Artificial, one called Buildings. If you're a Patreon, you have access to those. Artificial, I didn't use a whole lot. I used particularly a black line in there. So if you don't have it, it doesn't matter too much. If you want the walls, which I'll show you, you'll need the buildings plugged in for that. You'll also want to use Zephyr's cracks, paths, and patterns. That's what creates some of the distressed looks. I've got some of AOA's packs here, really cloud and water, and maybe a little bit of fire and electricity is primarily what I've used, but you want all three. You have vines, which I think I used, so we'll keep that, but it's not critical if you don't have it. You have all the Forgotten Adventures packs. And then you've also got really all of the Tom Kartos packs. I didn't use Tom too much in this, just to try to avoid having too much of two artists. So if you loaded them without Tom's packs, you could still get quite a bit, probably 95% of all of the things in here, but occasionally I did use some of his stuff, so just keep that in mind. And I'll try to link to all of these in the description as well. So just to walk you through the levels, at the very base level or ground level, there's nothing there. And then you get into some of this grid stuff that you don't have to worry too much about. This is what Zephyr and I and Rob used to kind of do some planning. But I left it in here in case you're interested in some of the shapes that were being used. And then once you get into the dining hall, you'll start to see things that I've built. Again, this is artwork that I did myself. This is not what Zephyr and Abominable Rob did. And you can just unpack these things and pull them apart and see how I did everything. You can drag these pieces off of each other. If you double click on these, you can see what patterns I used, if I used any special hex codes or anything like that. So it'll help you reverse engineer what I did to make your own maps, or to to make other things that you might want to enter into the contest. You'll also find things like this. These are green screens that I used when I wanted to create certain effects. I'll show you what I mean. This room right here, for example, is green screen. You might say, well, there's no floor. The floor is very invisible. What that means is you should click on your terrain brush and turn it on. And you can see the brushes that I've selected, and you can see how I've painted the floors in. I used the green screen in order to export out a clean version of this. And if you haven't used the export function before, it's pretty easy. You go to export. Everything that I do is at 150 pixels, and you hit crop. Oops, actually it might help you if you turn your grid on. You can see where the grid is. So if you say crop, and you select this, and then turn your grid off. If you leave your grid on, it'll export with the grid on, and typically you don't want to do that. And then you just click export, and you can export just this particular room. The reason I use green screen is because if you want this to be a clean tile afterwards, you have to be able to remove everything around it. So just keep in mind, if you see a level that doesn't look like it has any floors on it, it's probably because the terrain brush is turned on or off. And the last thing I'll show you is, if you did install my buildings pack, you go to your objects and you go to Baileywiki buildings. You have all of the buildings I've made as just drop-in buildings, but I've added to it all of the walls that you might use, and these are at the right dimensions. So if you're wondering, hey, what should I build next? You could always go and create a new level, and on that level, let's turn on my grid, place a wall down for a room that you might want to build, and that wall might go there, and that just gives you an idea of where you want to build. Now by the way, you can put that wall at level 9. I put it at 900, so it's above everything else. Then you can go and grab your pattern shape tool, and let's say I'm going to build something simple like this. I do use hex codes for a lot of these. You can see what those hex codes are if you click into my stuff. But we can then draw, whoops. You can just trace around this wall here. And now we've got the floor started for what will be undoubtedly a great room. So that's how you use all these pieces, and hopefully you guys have fun with this, and hopefully you can tell like what's happening in some of these. You'll notice this is a tile that I exported by itself so that it would render on top of the torture room underneath it. So there's a lot of tricks going on in here. It might help you figure out some of my secrets if you see kind of how I built some of these things. But let me know if you have any questions on how to use all these assets, and I'm looking forward to any contest submissions. Thanks, guys. Have fun making your maps.